All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast. Dante DePlacido, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports, and a guest here tonight. Not a Paisan, he's an honorary Paisan tonight. We have Sam Brown.
What's going
So,
on, everybody?
how you doing, Sam? So,
What's going on,
I'm used
Sam?
to doing this intro with just Zach, so now I got to segue back for this. But Zach, speaking of What's the Deal Sports, what's the deal with the New York Giants? Why do they have so much confidence in Daniel Jones? They should have had confidence with him in the beginning. And what they do, they give him a big new contract. Now look what he's doing. He stinks. He can't throw the ball. He threw a pick six. What is going on?
You would think that they would keep Saquon on the roster too to just try and mask it as much as they possibly could, but I guess that's not the solution. They just roll him out there with practically no weapons. His biggest weapon this offseason, Darren Waller, retired to pursue a rap career. So kudos to Darren Waller for that. I don't know how far that's going to go with him writing like broken love songs to Kelsey Plum, his former wife. But yeah, the Giants look like a train wreck. It looks like they're not going to be good anytime soon, or at least under the Daniel Jones regime. And as a New York sports fan, I know you're not a Giants fan, Sam, but you're more so of a Jets guy. But what do you think about the Giants quarterback situation?
Yeah,
As
man,
somebody
it's
that's
just
dealt with, not to cut you off, but as somebody that's dealt with some quarterback situations themselves of all the years of Zach Wilson trying to prove that he's a starting quarterback in the NFL.
yeah, we already knew that Zach Wilson wasn't going to work out from the start. I don't even know why the Jets drafted him, but we can talk about that later. When it comes to Daniel Jones, I think that it's just they made the contract and they put themselves in a horrible position when they gave him the contract, but they knew that. That's why they didn't give him a long-term one. And I think everybody pretty much knows that this is his last run. No matter what happens, if he has a great year, maybe, but I think they're probably just going to draft somebody because they can get out of this contract this year. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have another year after this. And they can draft somebody. They can go get Shedeur Sanders. They can go get Beck from Georgia. There's a lot of talent in the draft next year too, quarterback wise. But I love Saquon and I love that he's in Philly. I think it's a great thing. I think it's better off he's out of New York, and it's better off that New York doesn't have him either because, man, that man was getting destroyed every play. I had him on my fantasy team, so I key witness to watched him try to put his team on his back against the Cardinals, makes a big play, next play tweaks his ankle because he was doing so much for that team, and they never provided him enough weapons. And even Malik Neighbors, I think he's going to be a great player, but I just don't know how it's going to work with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones is probably going to be in the background by next year.
Yeah, I think even with Malik Neighbors, I don't think that's enough to make Daniel Jones look good. I mean, like you've mentioned, you've paired him up with Saquon Barkley in the past, and he still looked awful. You still need to give him an O line. You still need to give him a good running back. You need to give him more than just a rookie wide receiver. And even then, I don't think Daniel Jones is really capable of looking all that good. I think he could be a good game manager, but the way the roster's set up right now, he's going to have to do way too much, which he's not capable of doing. You saw in that preseason game, he tried to make something happen to avoid a safety, and it resulted in a pick six. He's not a guy who can make something happen out of nothing. And with the way this roster's set up, that's what he'll have to do a lot of, and he's just incapable of it.
Yeah, I think the Giants actually made the right decision in this draft by taking Malik Neighbors because you need to surround any quarterback with weapons. And I think even if they would have went out and got another quarterback to kind of offset the Daniel Jones contract, I don't know how well that guy would have done or if he would have been ready right away just from the lack of weapons that they do have. I think you can make the case, too, with the Patriots where Marvin Harrison Jr. was there to be had at pick 3, and now you're throwing Drake May into the throwing him right to the wolves with no weapons out there for him to make any plays. And I know Jacoby Brissett's going to start at quarterback, but it's tough for any young quarterback that doesn't have weapons around him to make anything happen. So I think the Giants could be in the quarterback market sometime soon. And like you said, at the time, I mean, the contract was all right just because like he might have been the highest paid for that contract. But if you look at all the other quarterback contracts that are out there right now, they're not as high as the Daniel Jones contract. But even those guys that are on lesser contracts are outperforming Daniel Jones. So I don't know how long the New York is going to have a leash on Daniel Jones past this year. But if the preseason has anything to look forward to this season, then the Giants fans could be looking at another top 5 pick this upcoming season.
Yeah, and as a New York fan, I could, and, even with Philly, you can get ran out of town very quickly if you're not showing any product. And Daniel Jones last year got hurt. The year before that, they tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. You don't get that many chances in the NFL. And now losing a premier talent like Saquon, and now you have Malik Neighbors, they're not going to try to foil that. Like, Malik Neighbors is one of the perfect product wide receivers that were in that draft last year. I think he was in pretty much everybody's top 3 ranking. So they're not going to let him mess up that product. So if he has a really bad production, probably by the first 8 to 10 weeks, they'll be surprised if he gets benched. They'll be surprised if they already start looking at the market, because they were already looking at the market in the summertime when Russell Wilson was available, and he was on a discount. So there's a lot of possibilities going on.
Yeah, and I think with, how much the New York Giants fans started to adore Tommy DeVito, I think, if Daniel Jones doesn't have a good start, he actually just announced he's retiring that celebration. I have no idea why. Yeah, it's a great
trademark, man.
I was about to say he probably got trademarked by somebody out there.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, with how much how much noise Tommy DeVito was making last year, and how much the New York Giants fans were really starting to get behind him. If Daniel Jones is having a subpar year, which I expect, I think the Giants fans are really going to be calling for Tommy DeVito to start. And I think Sam's right. You'll probably see it by about week 8-10, maybe.
I don't know. Tommy DeVito might be the third fiddle of the situation, though, because they do have notorious to the Philadelphia Eagles, Drew Lock, who ended up beating the Eagles last year in Seattle. So he's also on the roster too. So maybe if it's versus the Eagles and they go to make a quarterback change, maybe they might be looking at Drew Lock.
Yeah, could be him too. I honestly forgot all about Drew Lock.
Mr. Put On for My City, Drew Lock. Man.
Dude, that was my jam back in the day.
He was singing that vehemently on the sidelines, though. Like, he had a word for word as if like he wrote the song himself. So shout out to Drew Lock for that. Not a shout out to how he beat the Eagles last year down the stretch, though. If anybody was going to beat the Eagles at that point, I mean, it could have been anybody, because they were transitioning to a different defensive coordinator midweek that week. So, but I mean, that was also the notorious downfall of James Bradbury as well, letting Jackson Smith and Ajigba get right past him for the touchdown to end the game.
Speaking of James Bradbury, my God, did he look bad in the second preseason game? He looked awful. I said before on the podcast, I thought, maybe at safety, the skill is still all there. He just lost the speed. No, the skill is gone. He can't even tackle. I mean, he just looks lost out there.
Yeah, it's tough. I think Avonte Maddox clearly outplayed him. Cooper DeJean's back practicing too, so that's another guy that can go from a corner to a safety as well. So James Bradbury, as bad as it looked on the field, I don't know if they're going to cut him just because they know they can revert him back to corner too and have some depth there. They have a bunch of guys that are cornerback, safety, kind of like little hybrids that they can mess with on the roster. So it's actually going to be very interesting to see, because all those guys like the Josh Joes and Zach McPhersons of the world might not have a roster spot this year. One of the guys that I do think is going to have a roster spot, even though it might be slim pickings at the cornerback position, is Eli Ricks, because he did play in significant snaps last year and looked pretty well when he did, except when they had the number one when he was trying to match up with number one wide receivers. But you could see a path to him on this roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, possibly. Sam, it looked like you might have had some thoughts on James Bradbury.
Yeah, I think James Bradbury is going to just be that veteran presence. I don't like if they do release him. I really don't personally think they're going to, because it should have been happened if they were going to release him.
Yeah,
they did try to transition him to safety, but I played corner, So I know it's a different lifestyle of going in the safety. You're really trying to protect the back end and make sure nobody's crossing you. And as a safety, you're engaged with that person in front of you, or you're staying in a zone. And a dude that played corner for 12 years, I think he's a 12-year veteran, it's a hard adjustment. And your knees aren't getting stronger when you get older. So now you're trying to change your hip rotation. You're trying to change the switch to make sure you're protecting the number section. I just don't see James Bradbury being the best in that position. I see James Bradbury being better off with maybe 10 to 15 snaps a game, probably hanging out in that slot, because that's still a veteran presence. He's still going to know where to line players out. But we saw him in that Tampa game. Man wasn't tackling at all. So you can't trust
nobody was out there tackling in that game. That game was a wreck. And it's funny because going into the Tampa game, the biggest storyline was A.J. Brown not playing, and the offense not only looked horrible, but it's not like the defense did their thing and kind of stepped up. I mean, the tackling on some of those plays was absolutely atrocious, and they were basically doomed from the start too. So,
yeah, that was a very bad trap game. It felt like a trap. The whole week I thought about it. I was like, just a lot of momentum.
Once we were the last game and it was a Monday night game, primetime game, I knew something was up. And then we heard rumblings about A.J. Brown, but nothing was really coming out set in stone until the day of. And then once that happened, I kind of just tried to trick myself into believing that they had a chance and they could win that game. But at the end of the day, the momentum just was not working on their side. And just the slide that they had from the end of the regular season until then, it just was something that they just couldn't overcome.
Yeah, and that's the major thing about this year. You got to make sure that the relationship with Sirianni and Jalen's there. And like from reports, some are saying it's there. Some are saying they're still in a growing process. But that's a crucial part of the team. You don't see Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes having bickering moments. You got to be on the same page with your quarterback because that is the nucleus. So I'm hoping that works out. But other than that, with that offensive talent, there's nobody that's really competing with that firepower in the NFC. Dallas isn't. Commanders are a friendly team. They're cute. They're cute, but we have to see what Jaden Daniels can produce. And then we already just talked about the Giants, so nobody's worried.
They're not going to be competitive.
So that NFC East is right now it's a hot spot. CD Lamb's still not signed. We don't know when that's going to happen. And if he does get signed, it's still not going to be that CD that's coming with that momentum of last year. You still got to get CD engaged for at least 1 to 2, 3 weeks of getting him filled out of the game. So Eagles are in a great spot to me. It's just making sure that defense is locked in at all times.
Yeah. I think the Eagles are in a very good shape. The only thing that, honestly, I can't really even point to a position that really worries me right now. Maybe in the it's like there's so many unknowns in the secondary, but also so much talent. So I feel like the secondary is either.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna just like work itself out. But how do you feel about the quarterback controversy that's kind of arising right now that Jalen Hurts isn't involved in? Tanner McKee looked really good against the third string and second string guys, and Kenny Pickett was kind of underwhelming. And some people are calling for Tanner McKee to back up Jalen Hurts. What do you think about that, Dante?
Yeah, I think at this point, it should be obvious that Tanner McKee is your QB2. I think the last time we spoke on the podcast was before the week 2 preseason game when I said I thought Kenny Pickett didn't look all that bad. But after this most recent game, I mean, Tanner McKee was making all the right throws. I think he looks really good. They even took him out of the game because he was playing so well. They put Will Grier in. And then they put Tanner McKee back in again after that, and he.
Well, they wanted to run the situational situation at the end just to see.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And Tanner McKee showed up in that situation.
But you don't think it's like anything about him just looking good against like the worst? I mean, we're talking about the Giants and the Patriots are pretty much like the 2 worst teams in the league. You don't think it's just like Tanner McKee looking extremely good against the worst team in the league's like third stringers, or do you think it's just something more than that?
Well, I think third stringers are third stringers. I don't think it's like any team really has much better third stringers than another team. You know, these are just bottom of the barrel guys pretty much. The only thing is, from what I saw being reported by a guy I've spoken out against on this podcast, ESP Elliott Shore Parks. Or no, that was Joe Giglio. Well, now I'm speaking out against ESP as well because I don't like him either. But from what I saw him reporting, apparently Kenny Pickett in camp has actually performed better than McKee, but McKee has been performing better in the preseason games. So that might be something to take note of, I guess.
For sure. And I think they brought Kenny Pickett in for a reason, but I mean, it's not like a solidified thing. It's not like he's the starting quarterback and they traded for him in the offseason to be the starting quarterback and someone's anointed. I mean, we're talking about the second quarterback position right now. So I don't think either of those guys should worry about their roster position, though. I think they're all three. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to make the team. They're paying them $250+ million, but I think Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee are going to be kept onto the roster, and it just kind of is juggling. I think they would feel more confident with Kenny Pickett just based off his resume in the regular season and starting as a quarterback over the past couple of years as opposed to Tanner McKee.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Same way. But I just feel like with preseason too, preseason is the dress rehearsal. At the end of the day, you're getting prepared for the game. How do you perform during that rehearsal? And Tanner McKee is followed up with everything he learned from last year. And the dude is still talented. Like, let's not, even though Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick, Tanner McKee had some good stats at Stanford, and he has a nice frame. That height is crazy. I think he's 6'8", maybe 6'6".
Yeah, I think he's 6'7", I think, yeah.
Very fast and explosive. You literally saw he knew his reads and went directly to it, where it looks from Kenny Pickett, he sees the reads and he gets a little bit nervous and he second guesses himself. And that was an issue that he had in Pittsburgh. I think he still will probably be the second because you don't trade for a player like that if you didn't have at least a game plan for him. But I definitely think that Tanner should have one more chance at preseason, shoot a shot, or his preseason's not over. They got one more game, right?
Yep, Saturday afternoon.
He was, I think, and he's probably going to get majority of those reps anyway. He's probably going to at least clip off at least 30 or 35 snaps. So that's going to probably be their proving ground to show what they got. But Tanner McKee was looking too hot. I honestly, personally think you let him eat for the first half of it, then let Pickett eat in the second half, and then you say face. I don't know if Greer's going to be around. I feel like Greer's on the Journeyman tour.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, Zach, it's Jalen Hurts' show unless he gets hurt. And he's been very preventative. I think we had a little stint last year where he was gone for a few weeks. But other than that, I think he's been taking care of himself. I think he's going to think with more smart decisions, especially now you're going to have Saquon in the backfield. So you're not going to have to really depend on running that much or doing a lot. And we don't even know what's going on with the tush push. I'm still curious at how that's going to be executed in the game, or if they are going to continue with that. So we got a lot of things that we got to handle, but I think Tanner McKee can definitely be a second in command.
I think if they're not successful in the tush push this year, I think Jason Kelsey should bypass the 5-year wait to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and they should just put him in right away.
Yeah, we saw in the preseason they tried running it with Kenny Pickett and whoever
was Kenny Pickett squatting 600 pounds.
No, but that's what I mean. It's like it was evident. It's been evident in the preseason that it worked so well because of Hurts and Kelsey. I wonder how well it's going to work with Hurts and Cam Jurgens. Like, was it mainly Kelsey that made it so flawless, or was it mainly Hurts? I think we're going to find out. The one thing I want to mention about Jalen Hurts is what gives me confidence in him going into the season is he had to play last year with that ankle injury, right? And so he didn't leave the pocket much. He didn't run as much. He really learned how to be a better pocket passer. Now he's going to have his speed back. Now he's going to have, he's not really going to be dealing with that ankle injury. He can run more effectively like he used to. So now I think you're really going to get the best of both worlds with Jalen Hurts because he's developed more as a pocket passer since he was forced to do so. So I think he's going to look really good this year.
I think it's important, though, for a lot of people that keep talking about the progression of Jalen Hurts, and some people talk about eliminating him in the run game. I don't think you get the best version of Jalen Hurts if you limit him in the run game. I think with the threat of Saquon now, that makes the RPO even more enticing and even more of a challenge for a defense to stop. And I think the Eagles are at their best when Jalen Hurts is able to move mobily. And a lot of people forget, just because of last year with the tush push, a lot of those touchdown runs on the Super Bowl year came from Jalen Hurts, like really making plays outside of the pocket and just like running the ball down the field, and not just in short quarters areas, and just making plays all over the field. So I think if the Eagles want to open up their offense and unlock it to the highest power, I think Jalen Hurts has to get more back to his running prowess of 2022 than what we saw last year while he was dealing with the injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Sam, we want to talk a little bit of Jets here, being that you are an Eagles and Jets fan. The biggest thing is we want your take on as a guy who's a Jets and Eagles fan, we want your take on the Hassan Reddick situation.
So when the trade first started, actually, not even, let's say when the Eagles got Bryce Huff. When the Eagles got Bryce, I was like, okay, this is a fair trade because they're going to get a good guy. We're going to get Hassan Reddick. I think at the levels of their career, we could make an argument, but I think the consensus would probably say Hassan's a little bit better than Bryce. So I thought, hey, we're going to get another superstar edge rusher, complement with Quinnen, complement with Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald. I think it's going to be a great rotation. I had an issue when I saw a report about like a week before the trade where they were saying that Hassan Reddick was kind of sack hunting last year and he wasn't following his alignments. I forgot who made the report, but I saw that. I was like, there's really never been but there's never been an issue with Hassan Reddick ever in his career, even when he was on Carolina, even when he was on the Cardinals. You never really heard anything about him. So I was always just under the impression he just does what he does, works, gets his contract signed, good to go. But now in this position, your PR team isn't telling you the right things because you got traded and then now you're wanting the contract. And if the Jets said something to you beforehand, you should be honest and say, hey, I was promised something. But I don't think that was the case. I feel like he got traded under the impression that, hey, if you perform this year, we're going to max you out. We're going to give you a contract. You're going to be a Jet. But I think he's in the position right now that he thinks he can get that money. I don't think it's a smart move for him because what just happened with Matthew Judon, he just got traded to the Falcons. And then the first media day he had when they asked him for a contract extension with the issue, that was one of his major issues with New England. He said, you know what? I'm going to play out my contract. I'm going to earn my worth. So now you have a player that was all pro, just like Matthew Judon's an all pro, just like Hassan Reddick. Matthew Judon was in Pro Bowls. I think he has 4 Pro Bowls under his resume. I'm pretty sure about that. 16 sacks last year, or 16 2 years ago, and then because he got hurt last year. They match up, and for somebody to humbly say, hey, I'm going to work for my agreement, and now you see Hassan Reddick hasn't even stepped foot in a Jets facility since he did his first press. It doesn't look good. The optics just don't look good around you. I would have preferred him at least going to practice and sitting on the sideline and saying, hey, I'm here, but let's discuss something. Instead of now, nobody even knows. Last time I actually saw him, he was in Japan. He was taking Instagram photos in Japan.
Cosplaying.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with what you said. I think it was like a known thing in Philadelphia that he wanted a new contract, and Philly just wasn't willing to do it after they gave the Bryce Huff contract. And I think the assumption was once he got traded, the team that would be trading for him would automatically give him that contract. But then again, I do think that the Jets kind of, in a way, like it really does seem like you're going to give a guy a new contract if you go out and trade for him. But on the other side of it, he hasn't done anything in a Jets uniform to warrant a new contract. So that's what the tricky part is. So, I mean, if there was a team out there that was willing to pay him, they probably would have traded with the Eagles to go in and get him instead of having to go down this whole cycle of him like still being unhappy with his contract and moving to another team and then asking for another trade. It might just kind of screw the Jets over, and maybe they have to get rid of him for a certain amount of contracts, or maybe they just outright release him. Who knows? But this situation and around the league, not even just Hassan Reddick, I feel like a lot of teams are just like owners and GMs are just putting their set point of what they're not willing to go over, and they're just not willing to budge. Like you saw with Brandon Ayuk hasn't had a contract from the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. CeeDee Lamb hasn't gotten a contract from the Cowboys yet, and you can go on with a couple other players. So the GMs and teams are looking at how they want to build their teams now, and they're not just willing to budge regardless of the talent that they're getting back in return.
Yeah, and I think it's about the brand too as well. You don't want your players to see a guy that just got over here and is refusing to practice or play, get paid. Even when Christian McCaffrey got traded to the 49ers, he didn't get a new contract. After he performed, he got a new contract. For example, DJ Moore last year too, that was a premier wide receiver, got traded in that bulk with Carolina and Chicago. He came in without a contract, performed, got paid. That's usually how it goes. And I never really think the Jets would be a one and done position with Hassan Reddick. He's an all-pro player. He is at that tier where I think there's probably only 10, maybe. He's guaranteed in the top 10, arguably top 5, top 6 of what he does in that edge rusher position. But you're not participating in practice. You're not even really saying anything. So now the fan base is looking at you like, okay, you're not even talking. You're not defending yourself. You came over. You told us that you were going to be here without the contract. And that part too, you said that, and now you're not here. And you don't want to be on the Le'Veon Bell. Nobody wants. I'm a Jets fan. I hated that whole Le'Veon Bell even when he came to the Jets because he should have just stayed in Pittsburgh. But, the grasser isn't always greener on the other side. He held out. He got his massive contract from the Jets. And then what happened to his career right after that? So that could happen to Hassan Reddick too. Any time that you're not on the field and you're not perfecting your craft and staying consistent, one thing, somebody could get better than you. You might mess up your form by trying to edge rush. You hurt yourself. So it's just better off he comes in, he participates, he gets his sacks in. The Jets are going to pay him. It's just you got to show. And for the Jets too, DJ Reed needs a contract this year. You got Michael Carter. You're going to have to pay eventually Breece Hall. So it sets a horrible precedent if he comes in, he gets a 4-year or 3-year max contract, and then the guys over there are looking at him like, we just put blood, sweat, and tears. We dealt with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt in 2.5 seconds on the field, dealing with everything in the community with New York Jets, and you just gave this guy a boatload of money. What are we going to get? So it's just not a good position for Hassan.
It's pretty well summed up there. You mentioned two guys I want to ask you out. We don't have too much time with you left, but you mentioned two guys. I heard you're a big fantasy football guy as well. I don't know if you've had any drafts yet or whatever, but Breece Hall is in the top 3 ranked fantasy football players this year. What kind of season are you expecting from Breece Hall?
Breece Hall is going to be either RB1 or RB2, confidently.
That's where he's being drafted as too. I had a tough decision. I ended up going with Bijan, but Breece Hall was on the board for me there at pick 2. Yeah, obviously,
those are still solid. That's very still solid, man. Because I've been in that position too. I've been doing a lot of mock drafts. All my drafts decided to do it the week of Labor Day, so I'm laying that last week grind. But
everyone's nervous about the injuries. That's something that really hasn't happened in the preseason. Fortunately, it hasn't been too many crazy injuries or anything like that, really league wide.
Yeah, that and because a lot of stars aren't playing preseason, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Only major injury that I seen was with Mark Andrews. That got that car accident, but he's still going to be able to go. And Gibbs, but I think he's still good to go too as well.
I feel like there was an injury. I can't remember who it was, but I feel
the
like
biggest injury honestly was to like Rondell Moore, and just because he was traded this all season for Desmond Ridder. He's supposed to be the Falcons like number 3 receiver, and he ended up getting carted off with like an air cast on his leg, and he's out for the season. But really, outside of that, there hasn't been any like star skill position player or anybody like that realm. Also, another guy.
There's still 1 week left, so. Sorry, what were you about to say? No, I was just saying there still is 1 week left.
Yeah, so, but I mean, everybody's not playing the starters at this point now.
It's backups.
Practically now, this last week is like for the last 10 guys of the roster. Like you got 45 guys on your roster. You're getting those last 8 positions marked out and see who's going to make the roster or not. This is a big week for guys like at the end of the Eagles wide receiver depth of trying to figure out, and the cornerback depth, and like those type of guys that are fringe roster guys. But speaking of a guy that got injured very quickly last year, Aaron Rodgers, he's 40 years old now, and I know there was high hopes for when you guys traded for him. I think you guys got a discount and not giving up a first-round pick, and that would have been even more of a disaster with how many games he played last year. But how much do you think Aaron Rodgers has left in the tank, and do you think he's still at that elite level? I mean, this guy won consecutive MVPs only 3 years ago. Do you think he's still on that level, or do you think there's like a tempering period to where he's still going to be really good and an upgrade to what you guys had before, but not the same Aaron Rodgers in the past?
So much uncertainty, but from what I've seen at practices and what I've seen even with the team chemistry, I think Aaron Rodgers is locked in. He has a lot to prove. I think he's you got to be one of the GOAT in the GOAT conversation. You got to have that ick to you. And for having a whole year of people saying he's not good enough, this trade was worthless, he's definitely never going to be in that GOAT category. I think that's pissed him off, and he's waiting his time to prove what he has. And having talent like Garrett Wilson, if Mike Williams is healthy, that is a splendid wide receiver.
Big pickup right there. Mike Williams is a very good receiver. And the reason why I like that pickup so much is because he's a different style of receiver than Garrett Wilson. He's the guy that, even though Garrett Wilson, the first game of the season, made one of the most ridiculous catches last year with that one-handed ball tapped to himself in the red zone. That's a guy that you can truly rely on in the red zone and just down the field. He's not like a burner, but he's somebody that goes up and get the ball, and he's a deep threat just because of his catch rate being so crazy.
Yeah, the dude's 6'5", but then he has like an insane vertical. Like, it's just, and for Aaron Rodgers, that is known for his accuracy and putting it right on the money, and then having that much a freak athlete in the corner, that's great for the Jets. Breece Hall coming from the backfield. It's going to be a hard run no matter what, because we're in the AFC. We have a tough conference. We got the Dolphins. We got the Bills. Patriots, good luck. Not worried about them. Finally, I could say that. We're not worried about the Patriots.
Yeah, for like 20 years.
Yeah. Seems crazy to even talk about it like that.
Feels so good. I guarantee Bills fans feel the same way. There's like, don't worry about them. Yeah. We'll deal with them later. But they look good too. I do like Joe Milton. I know they got Drake May, but I feel like Joe Milton. His show. Well,
I was talking to Dante about that on the last podcast. I was always saying that like there's always a Brock Purdy out there who's the last pick in the draft, or just a random guy that emerges. And as much as I like Drake May, I think Joe Milton threw a pick versus the Eagles after I said that too. I guess I might have jinxed him or something, but he looks like somebody that has some talent. And there's always going to be a random guy out there that emerges out of nowhere, and especially at the quarterback position, you can never really tell. So maybe Joe Milton is that guy, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. But before I get off, too, I got to give my fantasy stack, because I've been hyping this up. And when I come back in the next year, I'll be back frequently, but I'm just saying, if I come back during Super Bowl season, Trey McBride, Kyler Murray, that's going to be a
stack. You like right there?
A quality.
How do you feel about Marvin Harrison? Marvin Harrison was like 21st on the overall like PPR rankings by ESPN. I was got around to that point. I had the second overall pick on Sunday, and I got back to the back end of my second round because I had the second to last pick in the second round in a snake draft. And I saw Marvin Harrison Jr. sitting there, and I was like, can I trust this to be like a Jamar Chase, like wide receiver 5 season as a rookie? But I just couldn't end up doing it, and I ended up going with Derrick Henry as my RB2. But it was definitely a tough decision. So I think the Cardinals are going to surprise some people. I'm not saying that they're going to meet the playoffs or anything, but I think they're going to be a lot more competitive than a lot of people think.
Yeah, having Kyler back healthy. I'm not even a crazy Cardinals fan. I just like how they set up their team. And, you know, even when they beat the Eagles last year, that was straight up just raw, like passion, having something to prove. Now you got Kyler that's fully healthy, Marvin Harrison there, Trey McBride under another year. I think he's going to definitely be in that top 5 category. Even when he was in college, he won like the tight end of the year. He's just very fast, explosion. I like Trey Benson. I know James Conner's there, but I think Trey Benson eventually will come into that reins as the running back. But they're going to be like a little fun team. And I think for the value of where you're going to get Kyler Murray at, probably in the 6th or 7th round. I don't know where he went in your draft, but we already know the elites go early. But if you get that mobile guy that's giving you at least those 25 or 30 points right there, and then you already know Trey McBride's going to give you – I had him on my team. So his last 7 weeks was like 15.
And he came off strong too. Like it wasn't like it was happening the whole year. It just came over a spurt and a stretch of time where it looks like he can really parlay that into the next season. He's still a young player. So
yeah. And you know they have confidence in him because they released Zach Ertz, right?
Yeah.
As soon as he was healthy, they released Zach Ertz. So they knew that there was something in this kid, and he proved it. And I just think with that stack, you could get the rest. Like I'm a wide receiver first guy. I always try to get the premier wide receiver talent. If all else fails and they're not there, then I'll start going for the running backs. But I just think with that team of the Cardinals, they're going to be good. Marvin Harrison, I can't in my heart take that risk because it's just history. Only one person. Jamar Chase is an anomaly. Like,
Quick,
I
quick
mean,
I guess
question.
Puka Nacua can be in that category too. So I guess Puka Nacua, but he's
but
also
he
not somebody
wasn't
that was like
drafted.
had a ADP that was up there too. I mean, he's somebody that wasn't getting drafted in most leagues last year at this time.
Yeah, not in the top 10. Not
Oh
like
yeah, no.
if Puka was in the top 10 last year, I think people would have just looked over that the whole time.
Yeah,
You
for
know what I
sure.
mean?
Sure.
But Marvin Harrison with Kyler, yeah, I think Marvin Harrison's still going to have an amazing year with that speed and that power and that experience from his father. I still say a 7-8 touchdown year, but not taking that risk. I'd rather have somebody like a St. Brown, AJ Brown, Garrett, even Garrett, because I know he's going to have Aaron Rodgers, just to trust that wide receiver one. No offense to Marvin, but if he was in the wide receiver 2 position, I definitely run for it, but not one. Can't trust him as
Now
my
the
one.
quarterback obviously is very important too. Like if even if they had a less, I mean, say it was Malik Neighbors and he was the like seen as Marvin Harrison Jr., but you have Daniel Jones at quarterback compared to
Yep.
Kyler Murray. I mean, you're not making that type of risk. You know what I mean? That's kind of like I saw if I had a pick at the end of the first round, Justin Jefferson, as amazing and revolutionary Justin Jefferson is, I don't know what's going on in that quarterback position with Sam Darnold being there. There's a lot of unknowns, so it's a little bit sketchier of a pick to make.
Yep. It's all about the chemistry, and it's all about what they have on their team. What's the surrounding parties, especially your first round pick. Where did Christian McCaffrey go in your draft? I'm just curious.
Number one, not even close. So what I was trying to steer Christian McCaffrey from not being the number one overall pick. I was trying to throw everything out there that I could for him to not be the number one overall pick.
I'm
But also
surprised.
this league that I was in, I'm the commissioner of. Somebody didn't take him first last year. I ended up getting him at the 3rd overall pick, and I made the championship. So I felt like that also had a lot to do with it. A lot of people felt the scars from last year of not taking him, and then they had to take him this year. So.
Yeah, I had that luck 2 years ago where I had Austin Eckler, and that was the year he went ballistic with PPR machine. But man, I really would have thought that Tyreek would have went first. Tyreek or
no, I think Tyreek went like 5th, maybe 4th or 5th.
Yes, wow. Where'd Saquon
I
go?
actually was thinking about him at pick 2, but I just couldn't do it. I don't know. There's just like the age 31 season, I felt even weird about I took DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams, but I feel like they're not the same player as they once were like 2 to 3 years ago. But I just kind of more so going off the name value and just more so depth on my roster.
Yeah. I still think Diop's gonna have a solid year. I think I like Tennessee. I think they're like a sleeper team. I like what they've done on defense. Hopefully they do something, but that Calvin Ridley, a D-Hop, you'll still get great points from that.
Well, that's like the perfect thing you talked about. It's like the pieces around them. Like Saquon's going to get better being in the Eagles' offense, not just because he's going to have touches taken away from him by A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith.
Better offensive line.
But I just think he's playing with a lot better players, and it's just going to give him more opportunities to have better matchups.
Well, not only that, Saquon Barkley is going from one of the worst offensive lines in football to one of the best.
But he was a higher AD. He had a higher ADP last year than he did this year. He's like a fringe 2nd rounder this year. You can get him at the turn of a snake draft, like depending if you have 10 people or not. And last year he was going more so closer to the top 5, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of. I keep seeing New York Giants fans talk about Saquon this year, like, oh, good luck, with him staying on the field, or, Saquon's washed or whatever. I feel like they're not understanding he's going from a horrible offensive line to an elite offensive line. It's like, yeah, he was getting hurt a lot because nobody was blocking for him. I think he's gonna look really good this year.
I don't think it's a shade on Saquon. I think it's more of just the talent that's in they have Jahmyr Gibbs up there now, and he can mess around and pop up, have a great year. I think Breece Hall last year was like in that fringe position, but now he's at the top. So I don't think it's a knock on Saquon. I just think it's the opportunities that other players have compared to him. That's what they're putting into those stats.
Yeah. This year really feels like the changing of the guard in fantasy football too. It feels like the rankings are really shaken up from years past. It's looks like an entirely different top ADP board than it was in years past.
Yeah, but also I don't see the Eagles mixing in the other running backs with Saquon a whole lot this year. I don't see like Gainwell and Will Shipley getting an immense amount of touches. I think it's going to be, almost all Saquon with like Gainwell and Shipley being mixed in a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
I
Well,
can
they
still
don't
see
really have
Gainwell on the
to.
screens.
I feel like last year DeAndre Swift was like limited to certain things that he could do, and he was still a really productive and good back. But they also kind of went away from the run at times, just because Nick Sirianni is just a more pass happy kind of guy with his scheme. But I think this year they're not going to go out and make this move for Saquon Barkley if they're not going to use him correctly. So I think he's going to be used in the run game, and we're going to see finally them use a running back in the pass game as well. Like they haven't had a guy that was able to do that, even though DeAndre Swift, that was his profile coming over from Detroit, but they just didn't use him that way.
Yeah, and now Sam, before you get out of here, since me and you are both big WWE fans, I just got to ask you one question. Who is your tribal chief?
It's Roman Reigns. You gotta acknowledge him. You better acknowledge him. Put the one on.
Just making sure.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be entertaining. I can't wait. He's definitely gonna have to reclaim his throne, but tribal chief.
Yep, all day.
I wish I knew what you guys were talking about.
It's never too late to get back in the wrestling.
You gotta get
It's on occasions
really,
from time to time, but I'm just not an everyday kind of guy now.
It really is the best it's been in about 20 years, in all honesty. And they're already steering away from the PG era, but now they're moving. I think it's Raw to Netflix. I forget if it's Raw or SmackDown, but I think it's Raw. And
Yeah, it's
that's
Raw.
It's just gonna be on a different level once Raw hits Netflix. So Zach, you definitely gotta hop on the bandwagon.
We'll see. Maybe I'll get on soon.
All right. Well, Sam, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for providing insight as a Jets fan. So sorry about that, by the way. And we hope to have you back on another time.
A compliment.
I appreciate you guys having me, and hopefully when I'm back on, I could talk good about the Jets. But if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again, you might not see me until 2000.
Yeah, we'll have you back on once the season starts. We'll get a time set, and we'll have you back on at some point in this regular season. And we'll see how the Jets are doing. We'll talk maybe Hassan Reddick's in a Jets uniform, or maybe he's not. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is on the field, but maybe he's not. We'll see.
All right, good to know. And I'll pull out my top 10 sleepers for the week because I got fantasy sleepers every year.
Sounds good. We can use some fantasy advice for Dante. Doesn't play fantasy football for some reason
Retired.
anymore.
I'm officially retired.
That's like a violation as a grown man to not be playing fantasy football.
I retired. We've been over this.
All right, Sam. Thanks for joining us, bro. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Yep.
All righty. So you see me rocking the Phillies uniform here. We're going to transition to some Phillies.
Was that Trey? Ice Trey? Trey Shiesty?
I thought I'd bring it out since he's been hot recently. He's somebody that I've been harping, pun intended, Bryce Harper. But the score's 1-1 right now. We're not gonna be doing.
Oh my god! I completely forgot about all that.
Yeah, we're not gonna be doing live updates the entire time like Dante likes to do. But
I do like doing that. I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, interrupting me like midway every single time just to do
that. That makes it even better. I get to completely interrupt you and see your angry face. That's the cherry on top of the Phillies updates.
They play the Braves 7 times in the next 13 days, I think it is.
Yeah, they have 2 different series against them.
They have the Braves, and then they go to Kansas City, and then they have Houston at home, and then they have the Braves again. So, I mean, this Braves team's limping into this series. Austin Riley just got hit by a pitch and broke his hand, so he's out now. They got Whit Merrifield playing. Gio Urshela was signed today, and he's playing third base to combat the Austin Riley situation. But let's not talk too much about the Braves, even though there's somebody that's nipping at our heels right now. Let's do a live.
Of course, Whit Merrifield has 2 hits tonight. Get the hell out of
here.
Who
cares, bro?
Who cares? One of them is a triple. Wow, cool. So I hate him.
So as of right now, let's see. The Phillies are still the Phillies are tied for first place with the best record in the NL with the Dodgers, who they have the tiebreaker over. The Dodgers have one more win, and the Phillies have one less loss. Little American League update. The Yankees have a half-game lead over the Guardians and the Orioles for the top spot in the American League, and then whoever doesn't win the division between the Yankees and the Orioles is going to be the wild card team, so we don't have to worry about the American League too much until the World Series. But how do you feel about this past week that the Phillies played? They played the Marlins in that series. We were asking for a sweep in both series. Obviously, it didn't happen like that. They lost one game in both those series, the Marlins series being a 2-game series, and then they ended up losing on Sunday to the Nationals after they were going out for the sweep there. Do you think they're playing better? Do you think they're playing lesser competition, or do you think they're seeing the ball better? What do you think the difference is this past week from the past weeks of dealing with straight misery?
Well, I think the difference is they played the Marlins and the Nationals. I think that's what the difference is. I really didn't like what they did on Sunday, how they basically threw away that game. They said, oh, Taiwan Walker's on the mound. Let's sit everybody. Let's put Cal Stevenson in center field. Let's put Garrett Stubbs behind the plate. Let's start Sosa instead of Harper. I like Sosa, but my point is they sat a bunch of starters. And then in the the ninth inning, they didn't even bring in a pinch hitter for Cal Stevenson. They basically just gave up on that game, which I just really hate to see. I get it, baseball's a long season and each win isn't as important as maybe basketball or certainly not football. But to just give up on a game like that, I think it's just a disgrace. It's one thing to sit certain players, give them a day off, but they clearly just forfeited that game for the most part, and I honestly hate to see it.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't understand. You're not asking somebody to go out there for an entire game when you're asking them to come off the bench and pinch hit, even if you told them that they were going to have the day off. I think they can lock back in. I think that might be a crucial situation to where you can test out different types of lineups and see who's ready whenever to throw out on the field. And I think that Bryce would have easily stepped up, or JT would have stepped up in that situation and pinch hit if they were asked to do that. This was something that I was talking about with Rob Thompson. He lacks urgency at times, and it just seems like he kind of just goes with what he's already set out to do instead of making the right managerial change in the moment to fit the situation. So, like I said, sometimes I feel like Rob Thompson just lacks urgency and he just can't get his point across to the team, and it kind of just rubs off on the entire team. So, regardless of it being the Nationals, you're in a tight race for the number one seed in the National League. So I feel like these games are very important, and that would have been a situation that you should have asked upon one of your best players to come into the plate and make something happen in a potential game-tying situation.
Yeah, and it's not like they would have to go out and play the field after pinch hitting, because you're pinch hitting for the center field position. You have Johan Rojas sitting there on the bench. It makes perfect sense to bring in Harper or JT to pinch hit and then put Rojas out in the field after that. You just need one at bat from them. I think they just I think they just gave up on the game. They really did. They thought, oh, we won the first 3 games. Who cares? Move on to the series against the Braves. It's just one of those things that I feel like is more common in sports nowadays, not even just in baseball, just in the realm of sports as a whole, that I really, really don't like it.
What do you think about the outfield right now? Because I feel like they have a bunch of different scenarios and platoons that they're rolling out there. They're really using a lot of guys. They're using Weston Wilson. They're using Cal Stevenson now. Obviously, Johan Rojas and Brandon Marsh are out there. And Austin Hayes, I think he started a rehab stint in the minor leagues. I think it was today, if I believe correctly, or sometime this week. So he should be back soon, and that might drop one of those guys down. Most likely Cal Stevenson.
He's Cal Stevenson is, in my opinion, Cal Stevenson is easily the odd man out. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing after dealing with the Christian Paches, the Whit Merrifields of the world, and then also the one guy who I was at the game on Sunday with my cousin Vinny, who has once made an appearance on this podcast during the live Trey Turner signing. by the way. But we were trying to remember the one guy that we got him. He was last on the Rockies. He played some games in the outfield. We can put a face to him when thinking about him. I think even
David
Homer
Dahl?
did. David Dahl, dude, we were so stumped on his name. I couldn't think of it. But yeah,
That immediately popped in my head. I don't know why you were so stumped. You were talking about
I
a
couldn't think of
London
it.
series legend.
Yeah, but after dealing with the David Dahls of the world, the Christian Paches of the world, the Whit Merrifields of the world, getting reps in the outfield, to know that, right now the only guy who I don't like in the outfield and Cal Stevenson, once Austin Hayes gets back, Cal Stevenson's down to the minors. That's very refreshing. I really, really like that outfield platoon once Austin Hayes gets back. Johan Rojas, his defense, his base running, it's all so valuable.
He's batting pretty well too. I'm pretty
He's
sure
been batting above 300. Yeah, since the
in the
All-Star break,
month.
he's batting
Yeah.
above 300. He's hit in 8 out of his last 10. I don't know if he's playing tonight, if he hasn't hit yet, but going into this game, he's hit in 8 out of his last 10. He is playing tonight. He's 0 for 2 so far, but yeah, so you got him, you got Marsh, you got Castellanos, you got Austin Hayes, who hits really well against the lefties, and Weston Wilson, who played out of his mind in AAA, and since being called up to the majors this year, he's been hitting very well, including hitting for the cycle. So I think we have and I guess technically Kyle Schwarber is also, I guess, part of the outfield platoon. He's made 2 starts and left, so we'll count it.
Got injured on the last time he started out. So
yeah, but yeah, either way, I mean, I really, really like the platoon we have out there in the outfield at full health.
Yeah, I do too. It's just depending on who's going to get the most amount of time out there. I think Johan Rojas, they were rolling him out in the last postseason like it was nothing. And I think if he's batting well, they'll feel comfortable putting him out there. I think Brandon Marsh hasn't been batting as well of recent, so that's kind of just a little bit alarming. But him and Austin Hayes can figure out the platoon there. So they got a couple guys. Weston Wilson's obviously just hit for the cycle, so he's shown that he can play at the major league level too. So they have a different batting assortments. But the one thing that's the outlier is Johan Rojas's defense compared to everybody else's defense, which is his easiest path to being on the field. So that's something that's going to be crucial in the playoffs, because if you can save runs in the playoffs defensively, then that makes it a lot easier for you to be able to produce runs as well when you're not playing catch-up ball. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they use this roster. I also want to see come playoff time, is Marchand going to come back up as a late September call up and then make the playoff roster, because I feel like he's just significantly better than Garrett Stubbs. And if JT has to miss time, JT hasn't been a lock since he came back from injury. It's almost like we've gotten a shell of JT, and it's not the exact JT that was performing earlier in the season.
Yeah, I think this is more so the JT I expected this season. Not to be negative on him, he's just kind of declined with age over the past couple of years, and then he pleasantly surprised me in the beginning of the season by playing very well. He hasn't been that great since coming back from injury. I would like to see the Phillies bring Marchand back for September call-ups, definitely. I think the only reason, well, not really the only reason I would currently have him in the minors is to give him reps on a day-to-day basis. But September call-ups, minor league season's over, come up to the bigs. I would hope to see Marchand play the backup catcher role for the final month of the season. I doubt it. They seem to really, really like Stubbs. I really just don't get it. But I would like to see Marchand be the backup catcher for the last month of the season. And then in the postseason, as much as I like Marchand better than Stubbs, the backup catcher obviously isn't going to see the field at all, really. So
but outside of the knee injury, how many times have we seen JT get hit on the forearm from a wild pitch, or someone swing in, hit him on the side of the catcher's mask? I mean, it's happened a couple times this year, and he's looked like he's banged up, and then he stays in the game. It just seems like the wear and tear just gets to him every time, and he's almost too tough for his own good.
He's Italian. What can you say? He's a Paisan. He's Sicilian. That's how they are. I feel like if
You would know
JT was
nothing about that.
around, I feel like if JT was around during World War II and he got drafted, he would have been every I feel like every World War II movie always had that one Italian character on the front lines just pulling pins out of the grenade with their mouth and chucking them and just taking a hit to the shoulder and brushing it off, with the heart of a lion. Like, that would have been JT in World War II if he was around back then.
Would also made for a good quarterback too. I heard he was a really good football player back in the day.
Yeah, good quarterback, good grenade thrower. So fun fact, by the way, for the viewers or listeners out there, the reason why American grenades are around is actually because during World War II, when the U.S. had so many drafted soldiers, the United States military was well aware that all these guys grew up constantly throwing a baseball, so they made the grenades round so that the U.S. soldiers could throw them more effectively, which they did. They were able to throw them a lot more effectively than the other countries involved in World War II. So fun little World War II tidbit there.
Is that going to be a part of the next Olympic Games? Grenade throwing?
It should be. It'll be better than breakdancing. And you know what? Breakdancing, that reminded me of my Meatball of the Week from last week, which reminds me now this week to present my Meatball of the Week. And this week, it's a rare case on this podcast where my Meatball of the Week has nothing to do with sports. Sometimes either there's just a big meatball out of the realm of sports that I can't ignore, or sometimes there really isn't that big of a meatball in the realm of sports, so I branch outside of sports. This week is kind of I'll never do that again. I don't know if you caught that. I said this week. Never gonna make that hand motion again. But this week it's kind of a combination of both.
On camera.
Not too many big meatballs in the realm of sports, but there is a big meatball outside the realm of sports. Not that big, but it's a pretty good sized meatball. It's no Costco meatball. And that is Mr. Lewis on TikTok. Zach, I don't know if you go on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen Mr. Lewis. I don't know if you know who he is. Now, Mr. Lewis, he's like not really like a health and wellness influencer. He's a guy who he has a lot of money. He'll wear like a Versace button-up shirt, go to like fancy restaurants, hotels, bars, etc., order the most expensive item, give a review on it, and at the end he'll be like, wealth.
I actually do know who that is. Not from
Yeah.
TikTok. I think it was from Facebook. And I actually knew who you were gonna. I was waiting for you to say that catchphrase because I knew where you actually knew the person that you were gonna talk about. But
Well, do
I
you
don't
know
know.
what he's in hot water for?
No, I do not.
Okay, so Mr. Lewis went to a Vegas buffet that featured lobster. Now the
Sorry to
buffet
hear
had a rule. The buffet had a rule, only one lobster per plate. So you go up to the buffet, you go your food, you're only allowed one lobster. When you finish that lobster, you can go up and get another lobster. Mr. Lewis stacked 3 plates tall with lobster. And they were like, hey, you got to eat the lobster before you get more. You can't just have 3 plates of lobster here. He did eat the first plate. The first plate was just lobster tails. And then the other 2 plates were full-sized lobsters. And I guess what he technically did was he went to the buffet, put a lobster on a plate, and then put it onto the plate he had at his table and just kept doing that, on a technicality. Oh, I did only get 1 lobster per plate. So the employee's like, no, you have to finish your lobster before you get more. And he threw a huge hissy fit at this guy, made a huge scene in the entire restaurant. And to make things worse, then he took his 2 plates of lobster and he threw them in the trash. And everybody is rightfully mad at him. He tried to make a video doubling down on it, basically. No one's on his side. Mr. Lewis, you made a big scene at a restaurant. You acted like a little crybaby, and you wasted a ton delicious lobster that I would have gladly eaten. So, Mr. Lewis, you're my meatball of the week.
I was waiting for you to say, Mr. Lewis, you're my lobster of the week. I thought you were going to transition it up to that, but yeah,
Well,
I've actually
no, because
seen that guy.
according to friends, being a lobster is a good thing. But anyway, what were you about to say?
No, yeah, that's interesting. I do know who that guy is, but I didn't hear about that controversy at all. But I feel like everybody's always trying to push the buttons with buffets to begin with. So I don't remember the last. I go to buffets like sometimes like with my families on like holiday occasions too, and I try and eat as much as possible. Then after you get through like the second or third plate, it's just pretty much a wrap. You can't even fill yourself up with anything. I used to go to the Old Country buffet back in the day, and
Yeah.
not saying that we wouldn't want to do business for a sponsorship with Old Country Buffet, but that food goes right through you, and that's a tough one from back in the day. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
used to go there
buffets are
too.
always interesting. I don't know
Yeah.
if you've been to the Peking Buffet in Glassboro.
I think I have back in the
It's like
day.
all fast
Yeah.
food. It's nothing like really special. It's all just like fast
There's
food.
like a new really good buffet. I want to say in Deptford. I'm not sure. But I
What's
do
your
remember.
game plan? What's your game plan when you hear about a buffet? Like when you're invited to a buffet, do you like set up a like eating schedule for yourself? Like, do you try not to eat anything beforehand so that you're as hungry as possible? Do you just go about normal business, or do you conduct yourself in a different way? Because I feel like my thoughts start to race when I hear that I'm going to a buffet.
First of all, I've not been to a buffet in many, many years. I used to go as a kid with my family. I've not been to a buffet as an adult, actually. Um, but if I were approached about a buffet, would I save room in my stomach for the buffet? Absolutely not. Everything I do in life, I do in rhythm. You know what I mean? Like a 3-point shooter coming in
Anyway,
from transition. Just do it in rhythm. Don't think too much about it. Don't plan ahead. Just go to the buffet and just let it rock. You know what I mean?
you're the
So yeah,
George Niang of rhythm shooting, dude.
yeah. I mean, you've seen
George
you've
Niang
seen
looks like he hasn't skipped any buffets in his life, dude.
you've
When they're
seen
on the
what I
road,
did at
he looks like
that.
he's setting up the Golden Corrals on the road when he's in the hotel rooms.
Yeah, well, you saw what I did at that one Phillies game we went to a couple of years ago.
Oh
You
yeah,
saw
you had
that
like
performance I
three
put
Italian
on.
sausages, pause, but you had three Italian sausages, I think, maybe
I think
four.
I had one or two, but I had a lot of stuff other than that as well. Um, in fact, I went to the Phillies game Sunday. Hadn't eaten yet. It was 1 o'clock when I got to the ballpark. Walked in at the gate where Bull's Barbecue is, and I said to myself, "You know what? I've never had Bull's Barbecue. Let me give it a shot." So I go to Bill's Barbecue. I get their pulled pork sandwich. I walk and eat it as I always do. And as I finish the pulled pork, I see the stand for the Italian sausages. And I say, you know what? I could go for an Italian sausage as well. So then I got in line for the Italian sausages and I took down an Italian sausage.
That was it. That was the only two things that you ate the entire time being there.
I'm just saying, I went one meal from
I
the
know. I
other.
know you ended up eating something like maybe some Rita's water ice. Oh, Dante just cut out of nowhere. Let's see if we can get it back on. We're running low on time anyway today, so we've already given you guys a nice hour's worth of talk. We went through the Phillies, some MLB talk. We also went for some NFL talk with some Jets mixed in with the Eagles. So it looks like we're about to wrap this up. I think Dante's out of here. So thank you guys for tuning in to episode 60 of the Paisan Sports podcast. And we'll be back next week at some point in time with you guys for another edition of the Paisan Sports podcast. See you then.